In World War II, British nurses went wherever our armed forces were. The phenomenal skill, composure and courage of these great women should never be forgotten.
Every battle area are the hospitals. Here, with a quiet and steady devotion, the Army's nurses, sisters of Queen Alexandra's Imperial Military Nursing Service, they are to be found performing their duties of mercy. Their foundress, Florence Nightingale.
I always wanted to be a nurse because it's caring for people. We were brought up being taught about Florence Nightingale, you know, and all those stories.
Now 100 years old, Mada Clare remembers her days as a nurse in the Second World War.
Matron called the senior staff and said war was imminent, and she'd been asked to send 4 of her staff as volunteers to join the Queen Alexandra's nursing service. I didn't give it second thought, I just volunteered, and I had no idea what it meant at the time.
Mada was 25 when she volunteered. The women of Queen Alexandra's nursing service risked their lives, providing medical support to our troops.
My parents were rather, well, shocked, I would say, worried. What have you done to them? I joined the army, they're wanting volunteers, and that was it.
The very next day, war was declared. Mada left civilian nursing, travelling to what she thought would be her new hospital.
We were to report to a military hospital, but when we got to Preston in the north, we found it was not a hospital. We were given a list of camping equipment. We were issued with a tin hat, and we were each given 3 army blankets. And we realised then that we were not staying in England.
It was time to face the reality of war. In the opening months of the conflict, Mada was among more than 1,000 nurses sent to France to treat our troops.
Very challenging, it was so different from civilian nursing. The conditions, everything. We would arrive and there would be a reception tent where the very sick people were brought in straight from the battlefield. There were some very stressful cases, very horrific really.
Mada followed the troops from Dunkirk to the deserts of Egypt. She assisted in operations and treated casualties from the front line.
As the fighting went on, we followed. We were on the road, mobile units, following the troops.
After 5 years in the midst of war, Mada was about to take on her biggest challenge.
The naval bombardment opened up. It was like a convulsion of nature.
Treating the casualties of the Normandy invasion. D-Day was the largest sea and land invasion in history. Over 156,000 Allies landed in Normandy to fight the Nazis.
It was the first time I'd experienced anything, shall I say, warlike. One really felt, we were in the midst of it.
Casualties in the first hour were heavy.
Medical teams faced their own battle, treating and keeping alive thousands of casualties in the weeks that followed.
It was rather, I say, frightening. We had to do emergencies before they could get even the camp big lamps up. I remember the first time there were 4 people needing amputations. We had to do a very quick emergency.
Despite witnessing the trauma of war, nothing had prepared her for what was to come.
We moved on right through France, Belgium, Holland, all the way through.
Nursing the troops as they advanced through Europe, Mada arrived in what seemed like a typical town in northern Germany.
We went into Celle. We took over hospital which had been run by the nuns, and that's when Belsen was discovered.
On the 15th of April 1945, British forces liberated survivors of Belsen concentration camp. Set up by the Nazis, the camp was used in this systematic campaign of persecution and genocide. As the British walked through the gates, the horrors inside were fully exposed.
Some of our medical officers had gone to Belsen and they were in tears. We wondered what had happened, and they said, well, something dreadful had been discovered and they couldn't tell us.
The things in this camp are beyond describing. When you actually see them for yourself, you know what you're fighting for here.
The first pictures of Belsen were developed in our X-ray department, and that was the biggest shock of all, I think.
This morning we buried over 5,000 bodies. We don't know who they are. Behind me you can see a pit which will contain another 5,000.
No one could envisage that human beings could be treated in such a way. It was heartbreaking, heartbreaking. I mean, they were not war casualties, it was just human beings just dogs.
Around 50,000 survivors were found in Belsen. More than 13,000 later died, too weak to recover from this systematic abuse. Along with the medical teams, Mada faced an overwhelming task.
I was in charge of a hut, about over 20. We were assembled and said that we were going to nurse them, had to nurse them. And they said the average weight would be 5 stone. They'd been starved and we were having to feed them on pre-digested food. You just had to try and feed them a little at a time just to keep them alive. Well, I don't think anyone in the medical profession encountered anything like it. I think it was the most terrifying situation I'd ever been in my nursing.
Survivors of Belsen were nursed back to health with thanks to the devotion of nurses like Mada.
I think you felt privileged to think that we were there to help them. They were so gravely, they would be shouting, "English sister," so pleased to see him, "English sister, English sister." Yes.
The sights of war have stayed with Mada throughout her long life. But with remembrance also comes the chance to reflect on the good amongst all those who served.
To see that procession of the veterans marching, it really is a very touching scene. The elderly people in that procession, it just sort of reflects what it was like in wartime, the comradeship, you know, it's still there. They're all together.